So hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers of Qesher, and the other is Sebastian. You can see us both here. The aim of our project, as many of you know, and thank you again for joining us one more time, is to find out about different Jewish communities, history, heritage, present-day situation. And you probably have seen some of our events. And actually, with today's speakers, Deborah and Artur, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, we have done already several talks about the Jewish heritage of Belarus as well, and of Minsk with one of their partners as well. So we have had the chance to learn about the whole history and what's going on today. But today we are hosting them as part of our book club series, our Qesher book club series. And they're going to introduce a very, very important and very interesting book. So let me introduce you to Deborah and Artur, who are today's speakers. Deborah Brunner and Artur Lifshitz, who are joining us from the UK and from Belarus, respectively, are the founders of Together Plan, which is an amazing charity working to preserve and revive the heritage of Jewish Belarus. And I'll let them introduce this organization better, of course. And today they're going to share with us about this amazing project, which is the book called We Remember Lest the World Forget, Memories from the Minsk Ghetto. So we're very excited to learn about how this book was made and what it's about. So I'm going to press the word to Deborah and Artur, and after their presentation, of course, as always, there's Q&A and comments, so please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them after they present to us. So Deborah and Artur, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. So welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm delighted to be here, as is my colleague Artur, and we are going to be talking to you about the book that we brought to publication with the help of the Jewish Jen Yiska Book Project, who are the publisher. So it is called We Remember Lest the World Forget, Memories of the Minsk Ghetto. And the Minsk Ghetto was from 1941 to 1943. And we're going to tell you, if you see the shadow appearing on my screen, please someone tell me, because I can deal with it.
It appeared.
Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay, hold on.
I mean, it does cover your eyes. My eyes.
There you go. Hopefully it's gone. Okay.
Still there. So
Has it
now
gone?
it's gone.
Okay, okay. Just shout at me if it reappears. I'm so sorry. It's a Zoom issue. It's not me. Okay, so here is myself, and I'm based in the UK. I'm the co-founder of the Together Plan. And the Together Plan works to revive Jewish community life in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe with a focus on Belarus. And we're working to, we're building communities around history, heritage, and identity. And we're going to tell you about how we brought this book, this incredible book, to life. So before we go on that journey, I'm going to hand over to Artur, who is going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Yes, hi again. My name is Artur Lifshitz, and I'm a co-founder of the Together Plan, and I'm a country director of the Together Plan in Belarus. Gosh, it was so long ago. I think after meeting Deborah in 2008, since 2009, I've started to introduce Deborah to the Jewish communities in Belarus, to different organizations. We started to run some very, very interesting projects. Then in 2013, we registered the Together Plan. And in 2014, I knew the ghetto survivors and former ghetto prisoners before, but I did introduce Deborah in 2014 to the ghetto survivors. We had an amazing event. It was actually the last day of Deborah traveling to Belarus, and the ghetto survivors have kindly presented Deborah a book in Russian. It was basically more or less self-publishing and was stories of the ghetto survivors. You can see the front cover. And Deborah got very excited and very interested and asked Ghetto survivors if we can translate this book in English, and that for the English-speaking world to find out about the Minsk Ghetto, and they kindly agreed, and that's where this journey has begun.
So back to me. It took us 4 years. And just to say that I'm not a Russian speaker. So actually, what was I thinking? You know, I was given this book. It was only ever published or printed in 300 copies for personal use amongst the survivors. And suddenly I had this book in my hands and I asked this crazy question: what if we were to be able to translate it? Would you approve that? Would you agree? And they looked at me like I was kind of crazy, and it's like, no one's ever asked us that before, but yes, of course. So I took this book back to the UK and
No, it's all right. Wait, let me, okay, it's okay. Yeah.
started to
Okay,
put out. Do we need to mute?
Someone has to mute.
So I started the ball rolling, and I found somebody in Poland who helped us to agree to translate the book. But it took them 18 months, he and his partner. We did some fundraising to cover the cost of that translation. But he did say to me, this would be a very, very rough translation. You're going to have to do a lot of work. So this was where the work began. We got this transcript. It was a very rough word for word translated version of the book. The stories were only ever really written for their families and for close circles. They were never written for a wider professional reading audience. And we really understood how much work we needed to do to shape these stories up so that they were readable, but also we knew that we had suddenly had to do a lot of research. The task was mighty. So this was, you know, towards the end of 2015, and I was a bit like, well, what are we going to do? So I pulled together an editing team. Here you can see Hilda Brunstein, this is Bet Denby. Jonathan was part of our team then, he's a Russian speaker. And we got other people involved, and I started to share out these stories so that we could each work on different parts of the book and start this journey. So here's me working on one of the stories with Hilda. Each of the stories was just incredible, but making them readable was a really, really mighty task. Now, we also came by several other stories that weren't in the original book. So here we were asked by somebody who lives in America, who found out what we were doing, if we would add his mother's story. Now, she was then still alive. She died in 2020. But she was still alive, and so we asked if we could interview her so that we could capture her story. We already had a copy of it in another book, but we wanted to check a lot of the facts. So here she is on the screen. She was in Philadelphia with her daughter. She actually doesn't speak English, so we had to have translators in the room. So we had several Russian speakers, several of our youth ambassadors who also were Russian speakers, so were absolutely fascinated and wanted to be part of the project. We also had Polina's nephew who lives in the UK. And during this interview, he actually said that what she told us, he'd never heard before. So she really did open up, which was quite extraordinary. And here again, you can see her here with her. Here was us here on the little screen, Polina and her daughter Sophia, listening to her story. And then the youth ambassadors were so taken by her that they then got drawn into the conversation. And here Jonathan and Sonia are Russian speakers, so they really engaged in conversation with her. So it was a very powerful moment, I have to say. So the book really was a journey into hidden history. So for example, and I can't share all of it here because we don't have enough time, but I'm going to share some of what we found out. So in the back of the book, when we translated the pieces in the back, there were communiques, German communiques between each other. And here, this one said that as the German soldier cannot always unfailingly distinguish Jewish people from non-Jewish local population, in some cases misunderstandings have occurred. A regulation has therefore been issued requiring that with immediate effect, Jewish men and women aged 10 and older wear yellow sewn-on patches on their breasts and backs at all times. That was very confusing for us because on the front of the original book, which we showed a few minutes ago, there was a star, a yellow star, which is what most people associate with Jews who went through the Holocaust. And so through each of the stories, the stories talked about, because these were children telling these were older people writing of their stories, their memories as when they were children. They would say that they would sneak in and out of the ghetto and they would take off their patch. And it was actually usually written as a latta being a Yiddish word for a patch. And Hilda Bronstein, who was one of our editing team, is a Yiddish speaker, and she raised her sort of hand in one editorial meeting and said, I'm very confused. There's a star on the front of the book, but there's no mention of stars, and they always refer to a patch. So we referred back to Frieda Reisman, who is the chairwoman of the Minsk Ghetto Survivors Association, now in her 80s, and we asked her, did the Jews in the Minsk ghetto wear yellow stars? And she said, no, not the Belarusian Jews. And she confirmed that they wore these yellow patches. And we said, why did you put a yellow star on the front of the book? And she said, if we'd have put a yellow patch, no one would have known what it meant. And she was absolutely right. So actually, it's our book that has brought this information into the light. And here we found, as part of our research, we found pictures of Jewish people in the ghetto or moving to the ghetto. And here you can see them wearing these yellow patches. I mean, we can't see them, they're yellow, but in this picture we can. This is actually an original picture, but has been colorized. So we are able to see that these are the Jewish people who were in the ghetto or moving to the ghetto with these yellow patches on. This picture wasn't in the original book, and so we put it into the book, this picture, because we thought it was incredibly important. And here you can actually see a picture of the area of Minsk that became the ghetto, which it wasn't a built-up brick buildings ghetto. We found out from the stories that there were little wooden houses around certain lanes and roads in Minsk, which look like this. Now, this is another one of the communiques that was in the book. And it's the communique that was sent out. So bearing in mind that the invasion of the Germans into the Soviet Union was the 22nd of June in 1941. And here, by this time, they've reached Minsk, they're creating the ghetto, and they've sent this communicate out to the Jewish people, and there are more than 5 points, but I just wanted to point out a couple here. So, for example, the resettlers are allowed to take their personal possessions with them. Persons caught trying to export or to steal possessions not belonging to them will be shot at sight. So, no messing. The Jewish people really got to realize the seriousness of this. Here it says, at number 5, after the resettlement is finished, the Jewish residential district is to be enclosed with a stone wall and separated from the rest of the city. The wall is to be built by the residents of the Jewish district. For this purpose, the bricks from non-domestic buildings and buildings to be destroyed are to be used. But that never happened. So we know from the stories that it was a barbed wire surrounded ghetto. So it was porous, which is how people were able to get in and out at great risk. And people did get shot, but a lot of the children were able to sneak in and out to get food, but also arms, because people were escaping to get to the partisans in the forest. But they needed to have a weapon to join the partisans. And so that's how the weapons were getting into the ghetto. We also know on the next point that it says Jewish people assigned to work teams are forbidden to stay outside of the Jewish district. The work teams are to leave the Jewish district only with a special permission to the workplace designed by the Administrative Board of Minsk. Those who break the present regulation are to be shot. So again, it was really reinforced that this was very serious, and it was what it was. And here we have a picture of the Minsk ghetto, and one end of it that was more built up and more brick built, but you can see the barbed wire and the sign, the warning sign on the fence. So now we're going to actually share with you some little excerpts from the book. You're going to hear them in audio, but you can also follow in the words on the screen as well, because I know some people like to read it themselves and follow with the audio. So this is Felix Gerbovitsky. He was age 10 in 1941, and this is a little excerpt from his story.
Shortly after their arrival, the Nazis began persecuting Soviet prisoners of war. I have clear memories of this, and it was difficult to witness. Many of the prisoners were injured and exhausted, with rags tied around their feet. Sometimes, as they walked along the street in work details, neighborhood women would try to reach out and give them some food. On one particular occasion, a woman tried to help by throwing pieces of bread and bacon into the crowd of workers. The starving prisoners tried to seize the food, but inadvertently created a mess of chaos and confusion. The guards began firing into the air, and onlookers fled in panic. The guards took two prisoners out of the line and around the side of a warehouse near to the railway. Shots rang out. The guards then ran back to supervise the calm with the prisoners. A few weeks later, we began to see walls and gates plastered with posters emblazoned with swastikas. On them was written an order for all Jews to immediately sew insignia onto the back and chest of all their clothes. This was the so-called lata or latte of yellow material that marked us out as being a Jew. I remember my mother sewing the badges onto our clothes. She hated the yellow patches and was embarrassed by them, doing her best to hide them with her hands whenever she could. Simultaneously, all the Jewish people were commanded to leave their homes and move into a dedicated area assigned as the ghetto. I remember that the orders were signed by Wachmeister Richter, who was commander of the ghetto, and Hauptwachmeister Gartenbach, the chief of the German police.
So here you can see that there's the reference to the latter that I spoke about. So here we're going to hear from Vladimir Trachtenberg. Vladimir is actually still alive. He was very, very young at the beginning of the war. And here we're going to hear a little bit of his story.
Then there were the gas vents. Mom often warned me that as soon as I saw vehicles, no matter where, I had to run and hide at once. Those vans were called dushegubka. People were forced inside the van, and then the exhaust gas would be piped into the airtight compartment until everyone suffocated. My mother used to tell me that if I somehow found myself in such a van, the first thing I should do was to take off my jacket, shirt, or any other articles of my clothing, and please forgive me, but she used to say exactly this, to pee onto them. The garment should be held near the mouth and used as a filter through which to breathe. Maybe then, she said, I would stay alive. However, I was one of the lucky ones. I never once entered such a van. I do recall that we, children, were forever discussing with each other where to hide or who could hold their breath the longest in order to appear dead. All this was in case Germans came to the house to take someone away.
And here we actually have some pictures. They're not in the book, but we, because of the other work that we do for our research, we have two pictures of examples of dushegubki that you can see what they might have looked like. Absolutely terrifying, and brought into we learnt about this, that this testing of gas was taking place in the Minsk ghetto with vehicles such as this. So then there's the story by Polina Dobkina, who you saw us earlier interviewing. And just to say that this is a very powerful story. She was the only survivor of her family. 36 members of her family were killed. The family gave us photographs of some of the members of the family that were killed, including very, very young children. It was a very, very moving story to add to the book, to the original book. And here we learnt that this photograph is Shifra Bedison, who is Polina's mother, aged 18. She was actually aged 41 when she was killed in the ghetto, but this is the only photograph that Polina ever managed to save to remember her mother by for the rest of her life. And here we're going to hear a little bit from Polina's story. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Once I had removed my patches, I was able to walk around the Russian area for a long time, before finally rejoining the column. I was able to walk around in the Russian zone relatively easily, since I didn't look like a Jew. The main thing was to avoid meeting acquaintances. However, inside the ghetto, there was danger at every step. Aunt Ася was a very smart woman. She was my youngest and as a result my favorite aunt. She often said that I should leave the ghetto, and I would reply, "Let's go together." But she said that it wouldn't work out with the children and she wouldn't leave without them. However, we were always uneasy in the ghetto. You could feel the next pogrom coming. When we were outside with the workforce, we could tell that a pogrom had begun when the Germans driving the columns didn't let the work column return into the ghetto. This wasn't because the Germans were such kind people, but because they were saving their workforce. This happened in the summer of 1942. I remember that. The day before, I had brought some blueberries home from work for Mother and Vovочka. At work, they still gave us some food such as soup or oatmeal, and I tried not to eat it but would bring it home instead. Now, when they finally let our column back into the ghetto, I saw a terrible scene. The blueberries, which I had brought, were scattered, and the pan with starchy jelly was overturned. All my relatives, 36 people, perished that day, including my Aunt Ася and her children.
So it's very powerful. And this is Lev Kravitz. Sadly, this is here myself with Lev and Frida Reisman, the chairwoman of the Minsk Ghetto Survivors Association, who I spoke about earlier with our tour. Sadly, Lev didn't see the book become published because he died, but he knew that we were working on it, which made him extremely excited. But he was a very, very traumatized man, and you can see here he's very frail, and he was a child partisan. He led people out of the ghetto to where the partisans were, and he would spontaneously break down into tears at any given moment. So he was a very disturbed and traumatized man because of his experiences. But here we're going to hear from Lev, from his story.
I made it through the wire first and approached the railway line, which we had to cross, waiting there until all the others had come out of the ghetto. It was pitch black and silent all around us. As I walked right up to the railway line, preparing to cross over it, something unexpected happened. When I touched the wire in front of it to step over it, I received an electric shock and cried out loudly. Panic broke out. I had even scared myself. However, I then came to my senses and began to shout, "Don't be afraid, it's not soldiers." Everything calmed down, but we realized that we had to return to the ghetto and go back to the Malina. We needed to plan more carefully how we could live successfully in such a large group. We couldn't really delay much longer, but The size of our group and the problems at the station meant we had to change our route. We knew that every morning the Germans rounded up people from the ghetto for work details. They were arranged in columns accompanied by guards. Our new plan entailed joining a column that was going to work at the railroad station, and this was how we eventually left the ghetto. It was very risky. We had discussed the route in advance and had decided that we would be traveling through the villages of Medvezhina to Staraya and then to Skirmantova. 2 to 3 people from the group would walk together at some distance apart from the rest. I would walk about 30 or 40 meters in front of the first group, and in the case of danger, I was to stop or signal by waving a hand. Passing near a brick factory, I witnessed just such an attack. From the gate, the guards from the brick factory began shooting. It was fortunate for us that nearby there was a field planted with tall rye. We all rushed into the rye field to hide, and then ran through it towards the nearby forest where we all assembled. We discovered that some of our original party had been killed, but people joining from the work detail had swelled our number from 30 to a much larger crowd. We continued making our way through the forest skirting the village of Medvezhina and avoided taking the road. With some difficulty, we finally reached the village of Skirmantova, where the partisans were waiting for us. I made it through the wire first.
And then we have the final story. This is Frida Reisman. As I said, Frida is still with us. She's the chairwoman of the Minsk Ghetto Survivors Association. This is Frida as she was during the war. And here we can hear a little bit of her story.
In the first pogrom of the 7th of November 1941, the inhabitants of Vitebskaya Street were moved to Respublikanskaya Street. However, my father's aunt Rifle Schulman was killed. She had been in a work detail which was taken away and herded into a mobile gas chamber. Her husband, my uncle, was at work outside the ghetto at that time. His work detail wasn't allowed back in while the pogrom was in progress. He therefore survived. The apartment at Respublikanskaya Street was a large one. Nevertheless, it was crowded as there were 4 families living there. Our group was allocated 1 room, and we all lived in the same 7 square meters. There were 2 beds and a desk. My uncle slept on the desk. My brothers were together in 1 bed, and the rest of us slept on the 2nd bed. I remember that apartment, and how jealous I always felt when Dad held little Luba on his lap. Children are children, wherever they are, even in the ghetto. I also recall that Dad brought revolvers and cartridges into the apartment. He hid them under a mattress, and I slept on top of them. After a day or so, someone would come and take the weapons away. Food was short, as we had no money with which to feed ourselves. Somehow, Mom still managed to get horse meat, which she cooked with cabbage leaves. She also made groats. In the early days, soon after the Germans had captured Minsk, there was looting in the shops, and on one occasion my brother joined the looters. He brought home a crate of vinegar, which really helped us. My mother used it to flavor potato peelings mixed with cabbage leaves. It was a masterpiece, a meichel. I remember the children's reactions to this day. That vinegar was such a tasty treat for hungry people.
So now we're just going to tell you a little bit about how we were, because of the book was so dense and intense and had so much in it, we had to create a glossary. So Artur is going to just tell you a little bit about that.
Yes, it's very difficult to speak after such stories, but Yes, indeed. When we understood that so many words and places, references are not understandable for the English speakers, especially because a lot of words are coming from Yiddish, from Russian. A lot of them, sort of the wording is difficult to understand. So, and we decided that we need to create a glossary. We need to create a glossary. We've also been researching a specific dates for the programs, actions, which were also included into the glossary for the English speakers, for the English readers to understand better. So, for example, the word Malina, which you've heard several times, Deborah speaking in the stories of the survivors, was a Malina is on one hand it's in Russian is raspberry, and on the other hand in Yiddish it's like a place where you to live, like a hotel or accommodation, and altogether it's like a sweet place, and it was a code word for a hiding place during the pogroms whenever the Nazis and sort of collaborators would come into the ghetto and they were looking for the Jews and getting into the house and shooting. People would run into Malina, and everybody knew that the place called Malina would be the hiding place. But obviously for the English speakers, it's not obvious. So that's one of the reasons, for an example, that we decided to create a glossary. Or, for example, the word yama, which means pit in Russian, which refers to the area that was inside of the ghetto, which had a natural pit. It was bordering on several streets, and after the war, even the sort of the memorial, then the place was named Yama, and it marked the location of the actions that were conducted in the ghetto in 1942. The Jewish Council was ordered by the German authorities to gather 5,000 Jews for deportation. And when the news sort of spread around, a lot of people went to Malina and went running and hiding. And on 2nd of March, it became obvious that the 5,000 people is difficult to fulfill by the German security forces. And then they ordered the collaborators from Lithuania, Ukraine, Belarusians, who entered the ghetto and started to catch randomly people, and many of them were shot. And 5,000 people were taken to this large pit, shot and thrown into the pit. So you would see the photo. This is actual pit. This is how the place looked right after the war. There's a monument that was erected by the community, by the people who came back after the war. But this is actually how it looked. And the reason for the glossary, we had to show that this was actual pit, and it was actual pit where the Nazis were shooting and throwing into it the Jews from the ghetto, because when would you visit it, you would hardly recognize it. It looks completely different, and there is this still memorial exists, but you wouldn't recognize it. So we decided that it needs to be in the glossary, and we need to explain to the English readers for their better understanding of even the stories of the ghetto survivors, because they speak a lot in this coding words, in the places that they call, because that's what the life in the ghetto, and that's what actually was happening, and that's actually how they were telling this story, and that's actually how they were speaking to each other during the ghetto period.
And as you can see here, the wording on the obelisk, on that memorial, it actually says, "The bright memory of 5 times the light of thousands of Jews who perished at the hands of sworn enemies of humanity, German fascist monsters." It's hard now to imagine that this was a ditch that Jews were run down into, but because now it's become more gentrified and it's more, it's just a memorial now. But these things come out in the book, and as Artur said, we've tried to statement that through the glossary. And actually, on the opposite that memorial, there is this very powerful sculpture by a Jewish architect called Leonid Levin, who we knew. He's no longer alive, and it's called The Last Way. It's very, very powerful and very imposing. So we finally managed to bring this book to completion. I have to say that it was it was hours and hours and months of editing and proofreading and re-editing and re-proofreading. And in actual fact, my contact in Los Angeles, who was at the ISCA Book Project, said to me I had to ultimately give it up and let them publish it. But just a little inside story. Hilda Bronstein, who was co-editing with me, she's got a PhD in English. One night at about 11 o'clock at night, I called her up and I said, we're going to just go through all of the semicolons. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I want to check that every single semicolon is right in the book. And she thought I was actually crazy. But at 11:30 at night, we went through every single semicolon in the book. And this is how obsessive I became over it. But it really was a labor of love. And I actually, looking back on it, would I have done it had I known what I was going to go through? Probably not, but I'm absolutely delighted that I did, because I know that it is an incredibly important book. One of the things that Artur didn't say at the beginning is when I first met the Ghetto survivors, we were I didn't have very long because I had to catch a flight, but I really wanted to meet with them. We met in a building called the Holocaust Workshop. It's the only remaining wooden building from the Ghetto times, which is now a workshop and it's a sort of little mini museum. And they were there. It was very, very cold. They were very closed. They had their coats on, they had their hats on, and they really didn't know who I was. And I don't think they really particularly trusted me. And within half an hour of me reassuring them that I was really interested in their stories, they had given me this original copy of one of the 300 books that were ever printed. What I love about this photograph, which was in the Times of Israel, was this was taken at the book launch, which was hosted by the British Embassy in Belarus. And we had a fantastic event bringing 150 people together from across the whole of Belarus. We had my cohort, my co-editors, my editing team who came from the UK. And now the survivors were so open and proud, and it really empowered to know that the whole of the English-speaking world could now read their stories. And it really was a massive achievement. And when I saw them like this, I knew it was all worth it. And here, just as our final picture, this is a very important picture. This is Polina Dobkina, who lost the 36 members of her family, with her husband, who they married after the war, and their first son, they had 3 children. This is their first son, who is this man here. He's called Semen, and with his daughters. And he lives in Belarus, and he came with his daughters to the book launch. Here's Hilda Bronstein sitting over here, and they're reading the stories. They're looking at Polina's story, and here is Polina's mother again. So I think that is a very powerful picture, and it was really special to see relatives of people who had survived, seeing that this was now being read on a much more international level, that this book that was only ever printed in Russian for personal use in 300 copies had now been transformed. And that's something that I know that we are all here at the Together Plan extremely proud of. So just as a little teaser, and actually thinking that I would never do this, thinking I would never do this again. While we were translating the book, we were 3 years in, and a man called Leonid Sirinsky, whose aunt Anna Machis escaped the ghetto, handed me a very little book and said, would we translate this book? And I took the book because I had to, and I politely said, well, I'll see what we can do. And I took this book and thinking, I don't think I can ever go through this again. And it sat on my desk for another 2 years, 3 years actually, until COVID. And as COVID set in 2020, this little book looked at me, and I contacted one of our student, he was a postgrad by then, youth ambassadors who had done Russian at Oxford University. And I said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm on furlough. I've got nothing to do." And I said, "Would you like to translate a book?" And he said, "Absolutely." So I put it in the post, and he translated the book, and we started the process all over again. So that took 3 years, and I'm delighted to say that we again went through it, and that was published in October of 2023. So maybe, Dora and Sebastian, we might be doing another book talk about Anna Machis, Testimonies of Tragedy and Resistance in the Minsk Ghetto, which is quite an amazing book. So on that note, I will say that is done, and please ask us any questions.
Thank you so much, Deborah and Artur, for sharing this story with us. I'm just gonna close. Okay, there. It's always amazing to listen to the two of you and what you guys managed to do and put together. So thank you so much for doing this work and for sharing it with us, of course. And thank you everyone for being here and listening. Of course, we will share with you all the details about the Together plan and Deborah and Artur's emails, and also where you can buy the book. I will read now. I want to also thank everyone who has been commenting on the chat. I see that a lot of people have personal connections and family connections, and I'll just read a few of these comments, questions. So Frank says, I have original letters in Yiddish from close relatives in Belarus. They were written as they were fleeing Hitler and were never heard from again. They lived near Minsk before they fled. Any insight how to find out what happened to them?
Wow. Artur, do you want to answer that one? That's a difficult one. Frank, we know you, I believe.
Well, I mean, would be very interested to read, to see
Yeah.
these letters, or maybe you can get in touch with us. And definitely, if you know the names, I mean, we do have an archive service with the Together plan where we can research and can try to help you finding out about the fate of your relatives. So the advice is to get in touch with us or the contact details, and remind us of your case, and we'll try to help. We'll try to point you into the right direction and see if we can locate your relatives and what happened. And
Thank you. Thank you. I want to read also Barbara's comment. I had a great aunt and uncle originally from Galicia in Vienna who were deported to the Minsk ghetto and showed up on arrival. So it's not the question, but I just wanted to acknowledge Barbara's comment, and thank you, Barbara, for sharing this with us.
So an interesting list to say to that, and that's really important. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the children that escaped Europe on the kinder transport, their parents ended up being transported from Vienna and from Austria and Germany to Minsk, and were killed in Trostinets or in the ghetto. Trostinets was a death camp just outside of Minsk, which is in 2015. There is now a memorial park there that has been opened, And interestingly, those were the Jewish people who were in the ghetto who wore the yellow stars. So there are pictures that you can search on the internet of Jewish people wearing yellow stars in the Minsk ghetto, but they wouldn't have been the Belarusians. They would have been the Germans and the Austrians. And the Belarusian Jews called them the Hamburg Jews. That was their sort of collective name, and that all came out in the book.
Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge also everyone else who shared that they had family in Belarus or in different places in Belarus, not necessarily only Minsk. Do you have any information about the Pinsk ghetto?
Yes, we do. We do have information about all of the ghettos in Belarus. That's another thing that we're working hard on. We're working on several books actually, where we're gonna write about all of the ghettos in Belarus, which were counted to 499 ghettos, including the Pinsk ghetto. So you can imagine that the whole of territory of Belarus was one big ghetto.
And related to that, what are the next projects of the Together plan?
Okay, so that's a really good good question from I can see Michael. I don't know Michael who, but thank you for asking that question, Michael. So currently we are building a very significant memorial on the territory of the Brest-Litovsk Jewish Cemetery. It is oh, someone's sharing their screen. I don't know why. It's a big project, and we've been working on this for 11 years. We are bringing 1,249 remnant salvaged pieces of gravestones that used to stand in that cemetery, and we're hoping that that project will be completed by the summer of 2025. And if anybody wants to know about it, there's articles about it on our news section of our website, but anybody can subscribe to our newsletter because we're doing monthly updates about that at the moment. And then beyond that, I mean, Marcia, who is here with us, was part of our crowdfunding campaign for that project, has seen it sort of come to life, which is very exciting to have you here, Marcia. And beyond that, our big project is that we are going to be focusing on actually mapping the whole of Jewish Belarus. It's a huge project, and we are going to be doing more probably crowdfunding for that project. It's going to be the creation of a digital heritage portal where we will actually map all of the sites, including cemeteries and places where ghettos were, as Artur spoke about. We'll be, mapping out audio tours that we're creating, showing where the contemporary communities are today, the projects that we're working on, abandoned synagogues, buildings where Jews lived. It's huge. It's an absolutely huge piece. So if anybody's interested in knowing more about that, you need to email us.
Thank you. And I think this question might be, it's also from Michael, the whole of Jewish Belarus, past and present, or just past?
No, past and present. Absolutely past and present. There's a whole sustainable development element to it that ultimately when things change, people will be traveling there. We're hoping, people will be able to plan their trips and go on tours, meet with communities, visit museums that people don't even know exist, go to places like the Museum of Jewish Resistance, which Tamara is here, who was part and parcel of creating. There is a lot of hidden history in Belarus, and it is unbelievable, and we want everyone to know more about it.
Thank you. And I want to tell everyone that actually we're going to host Deborah and Artur for another talk on January 28th, where they will specifically speak about the Jewish heritage and also the Jewish present of Belarus. So if you want to learn more, it's already on our website, on our upcoming events. We will also share it with you tomorrow in our follow-up email, but you can join us for this talk as well. What is the best way to purchase the book?
So it can either be ordered on our website. It's easy to find on the website, it's along one of the tabs with a drop down, or you can buy it on Amazon, but it's cheaper, I believe, if you order it from us.
Thank you. And there are a lot of comments. I'm sure Deborah and Artur, you will go through the chat, but a lot of people are sharing how interesting and what an amazing work you guys have done. And I just want to say also that it's important to read the comments as well. I see Francine's hand up. Francine, do you have a question? Okay.
I think that's been up since the beginning, actually.
Okay. What is the cost of the book?
The book, I believe, actually, I haven't checked recently. I think it's £25 on our website, and I think it's more on Amazon. Yeah, but it depends where you are because we also charge postage and packing. But that's not hugely expensive. It just depends where you are in the world. I mean, if we're sending it special delivery to somewhere, obviously we have to quote you the packaging. So, but the best thing to do is get in touch with us, and I can tell you more. I've just put my email address in, or you can get it on the website. And also just to say, Neil Adams just reminded me, we are currently working on 2 more books. Don't know when they're going to be finished, but they're works in progress. So watch this space. There's more to come.
And actually, a question that we often hear in book clubs, if it has a Kindle version or if it has an audio version. You shared with us some very nice audios, so just it made me think of that if there is an audiobook.
Not at the moment, but it is something we should think of doing because I think people do like having things in their ears and learning more. And it is very powerful actually when you hear it read. It actually takes on a whole new life of its own when you actually have it read to you from when you're actually reading it. And I know a lot of people like to hear that as well. So it's something we should look at.
So I just put another project on your plate.
I know, right? Thank you, Dora.
Okay. Well, I know you never have what to do, Deborah, so it's always
Yeah, I
good to
know.
give
Always
you more
twiddling
work.
my thumbs, thinking,
Um, so now I don't see now more questions, but just a lot of comments about the testimonies and how heartbreaking. Of course, it was really heartbreaking to listen, and also thanking you for bringing these stories to life and to be able to read for a non-Russian speaking audience. So as always, tomorrow we will share this recording with everyone who registered. So if you missed part of it, you will receive it tomorrow, and you will also receive from us all the information that we mentioned, like where you can order the book and how you can get in touch with Deborah and Artur. I know that they are constantly looking for stories about Belarus. So those of you who have family stories that you haven't shared with them yet, please feel free to reach out. And we hope to see you soon on other events and also on the events on the Jewish Belarus on January 28th. And of course, we will share with you our other upcoming events as well. So I'll just pass the closing words back to Deborah and Artur.
oh, just wanted to say thank you so much. I know a couple of people have asked how much is the book in dollars. I think it's around $30. I think you can pay in dollars as well. But again, check the website or email me. And can see Sebastian's put a link in as well. So if you missed it, you can just scroll back up the chat. But Dora, if you when you send everything out, if you can put the link in as well, I'll send it to
Of
you.
course.
And yeah, as Dora said, if you've got a connection to Belarus, to Jewish Belarus, and you want to share your story with us, please get in touch. We really want to hear from you. It's really, really important. So we're waiting to hear from you. And Dora and Sebastian, thank you for having us as always. It's always lovely to be here.
Yes, thank you. Again, thank you for being here, and do share this story as well with your friends, with your family. And if you know that you're connected to Belarus, if you know your relatives, you know that once they lived on this territory, please do get in touch, and we're happy to help you to find more information. We do have dedicated service. It's very good quality, and you'll be surprised and amazed sometimes what you can find. So do get in touch, and yes, and all have a good evening or good morning or good day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining, and we hope to see you soon. Bye.